Hi, everybody, and welcome to the last in our five sessions in our Climate Action series. And this is brought to you by Accelerate Neighborhood Climate Action, better known as Yes, thank you. Much appreciation to all of you who have supported this program. And I probably should ask again, although I know not everybody's here yet, but how many in the room have been here all five? Wow, okay, that's a pretty good percentage. I don't have my gold stars tonight, but you deserve one. And then who's brand new today? Who's here for the first time? Okay, a number of you. All right. Thank you so much for coming. So for those of you who are new, my name is Linda Hamilton, and I'm the Redlands Coordinator for Accelerate Climate Action, and or Anca. And Anca is a program that brings climate action down to the neighborhood level. It's really about empowering neighborhoods to prepare for severe climate change and also to help us all do our part in reducing carbon emissions in order to avoid the worst of the worst case scenarios. So tonight we're going to be talking about preparing for coming food shortages. And we'll be looking at the situation from both a global and a local perspective. And then we'll be looking at what we can all do as individuals, families, and neighborhoods to help build local food security. So this is a really critical topic tonight. And when we are facing the challenges of this magnitude, neighborhoods become extremely important. I always say, and you five-timers can help me with this, neighborhoods are where everyone can be involved. Neighborhoods are where individual action can become, who said it? Say it louder. Collective, yes, all right. And finally, it's where everyone can make a difference. I almost gave that away. And that goes from young children to very old people like me. Anyway, I think that you've all probably realized through this series, if you hadn't already known, that climate change is happening much faster than anyone or any sophisticated computer model predicted. Just a couple of weeks ago, we probably all heard about this, but an ice shelf the size of New York crumbled in Antarctica. And this was not predicted to happen until probably 2100 or later, because the eastern side of Antarctica is thought to be very stable. So I share this with you not to alarm you, but to just stress the importance of preparing for worst case scenarios, and hopefully we all can begin to understand that we can't wait to the last minute, right? And the other thing that I hope that is coming through is how much our lives are going to change in the coming years due basically to having less energy. It's really going to affect everything, isn't it? So I figure we can either be victims to this, or we can be proactive, and we can begin to intentionally create the kind of lifestyle and community that will be more resilient and more sustainable, and hopefully the blows will be softer. And what if this new lifestyle and community what if this new lifestyle was even better than our current lifestyle? That's possible. If you listen to the news, we all know that things are not going well in the world. And it's not just war, it's so many things. And it kind of seems like there's something fundamentally wrong. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not. But so is it possible, by working together in our neighborhoods, our community, that we can actually create a better way of living, where we can learn to take better care of our environment and of each other, where we stop consuming so much and learn to value simple things like getting together with friends and gardening, playing games, making music together. Our topic of preparing for coming food shortages might possibly help us get a glimpse of this. So we want to begin tonight, as we usually do, by asking you to turn to the person next to you and just share your name. Hopefully it's not somebody you know well. And what concerns you most about our food supply as you consider the impacts of climate change? Can you do that very quickly? I'll ring the bell in 1 minute. Have you both had time to share? Okay, great. So before we turn to our panel, I feel like I need to say a little bit more about Anca for our first-timers. So I'm going to ask for a little help again from our five-timers. So what's one thing that you know about Anca now that you think new people should know? Just one thing. Who can give us one? Anybody? Yes.
To me, it seems like a very good program, and the 5 classes we've had just really shows that you're going to be getting into depth.
Okay.
Trying to make a difference.
Okay, so we're going into depth. Thank you for those kind words. Yes.
Well, one thing I'll share that I took away starting from the first meeting that I came was I think Anca is effective at helping us think about the effects of climate change in terms of social justice, that it's something where it's part of the kind of lifestyle and the kind of community that we wanted to be a part of going forward into the future.
Thank you. And those are all things that Anca's about. And of course, we are a neighborhood-based program. That's probably most foundational. And we do 2 major things. One is that we hope to be engaging neighborhoods in a planning process called Climate Action Forums, where neighbors will be deciding together concrete actions for both reducing carbon emissions and building more climate resilient neighborhoods. And remember, being climate resilient means being better prepared for the impacts of climate change. And that's really kind of the most important thing I think that we can be doing now, working at the local level. And anybody know the second thing in one word? The second thing we're about is education. What we're doing here, we want to continue this. So we'll continue to build awareness of climate change in the community and empowering neighborhoods through talks like this, as well as we hope to do a lot of how-to workshops. We need to learn new skills for the new world that is coming. So I think there'll be a lot of fun, interesting things happening in the future. And that's our ongoing educational program. And then Anca is guided by a local steering committee that has helped to launch the program. So I'd like for new people to have anybody in the room who's on the steering committee introduce themselves. Who's here? Diane.
Diane Landeros.
Okay.
Diana Summer.
Is that it in the room? Okay. There are others, but I think they're busy outside there. And let's see. We also have a number of organizations that are lending support of various kinds, and they include the City of Redlands, the University of Redlands Environmental Studies Program, Smiley Library, and Esri. So, and tonight I'm so pleased that once again we have Denise Davis with us. Denise, our City Council representative for District 1. Did you want to say anything tonight, Denise?
I'm so impressed by this series and by your dedication to showing up. And I know that Linda and others will be presenting at our city council meeting starting next week, which is so exciting. I'm looking forward to us all mobilizing together to work towards solutions to climate change. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you, Denise. It's a pleasure having you. So our agenda tonight is, as usual, panel of 3 people for 40 minutes, Q&A, guided discussion, very brief, and then our closing, and then our last get acquainted time. So, and well, I'll point out some things later at the closing. But so now, before we introduce our speakers for tonight and have Claudia come up, I just want to say a word about our panel, the panel dynamic. So each of the 4 panels this month have had 1 person from the university, 1 from the city, and 1 from Anca. And each of these entities has something important to bring to the table to address this climate emergency. They include knowledge, resources, planning, policy development, and volunteers. And as we go forward, the involvement of residents, that's you and me, at an unprecedented level will be critically important. Anything that is done by the city, university, or any nonprofit organization needs the support of the residents of the community. And for us to really be able to prepare for the climate emergency that we're in, we need all hands on deck. Okay? And with that, I'd like to ask Claudia Ruiz, who is an Anca volunteer, to introduce our speakers for tonight.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce the 3 speakers for tonight. First, we have Daniel Closter. He's a professor of environmental studies at the University of Redlands. Dr. Closter holds a PhD in geography from the University of California, Los Angeles. His lectures include topics such as food and nature and environmental justice. His research examines sustainable community development strategies in Mexico, including community forestry, forest certification, payment for environmental services, and environmental dimensions of commodity chains such as wood, cacao, and mezcal. His work on the ways that migration affects rural sustainable development in Mexico has been supported by the Fulbright Garcia Robles Scholarships and the National Science Foundation. And I just learned that he also visited my country for a year, which makes me very happy. Thank you, Dr. Closter. Our second speaker is Dave Jaffe. We are seeing you around a lot. And during the past 25 years, Dave developed an impressive career supporting and creating recreational programs for the city of Redlands. Today, Dave, acting as the recreation supervisor, administers and evaluates youth and senior citizen recreational programs, farmers market, community gardens, social services, and sports and athletics programs. Originally from San Bernardino, Dave is a certified level 1 PSI AAASI in snowboarding. That's an expressive qualification as a snowboarding instructor. He has, I would like to join you someday. He has 2 boys who are both Boy Scouts and play sports year-round. He resides in Angeles Oaks with his family. His hobbies include skiing, snowboarding, backpacking, and enjoying the outdoors. And thank you for all that you do for us here at the Senior Community Center. And our last speaker is Tyra Delger. She is a biologist and environmental planner who has done significant work in climate resilience. She has a bachelor's degree in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of Colorado and holds a Master's of Science in Environmental Management from the University of San Francisco. So we have a very impressive lineup for tonight. Let's enjoy and learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your interest in this topic. I'll give you some ideas to chew on. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay. So the food crisis that wasn't will give us some clues or some ways of thinking about the food crisis that we face. In 1970, around then, environmentalists looked forward to a future that was grim. Populations were skyrocketing, and the ability of the world to produce food was clearly limited. So by the year 2000, my people, environmentalists, predicted that there would be famine, that there would be starvation, that things would be terrible. However, in fact, by the time we got to the year 2000, food production had increased even faster than population, and there was more food per person in the world than there was in 1970. Population doubled, food production more than doubled. Next slide. Next slide. So let me outline 4 quick lessons from the 30-year history of a food crisis that wasn't. The first is that population growth alone didn't explain that scarcity. But when we looked back at that period and when we look at it now, one thing that was very important is that population does not even explain food demand, because you can have very different amounts of food demand with different populations. Meat is the key word here. And as diets became more and more meat-centered, as people became richer, not only more numerous, but richer, the amount of food that we needed that was consumed increased greatly. The second is that technology is a dynamic thing that changes, and during that time period, technological innovations created, in a sense, more land because we got so much more crop from an individual hectare. So when we make predictions based on current technologies, we will be wrong. We will have different technologies by the time we get to the future. The third and most important is that when we do look at hunger and scarcity, we see that it wasn't caused and isn't caused by environmental limits exactly, or environmental change exactly, but by the way that human beings are organized to distribute surplus, to concentrate surplus, to exclude people from that surplus. With more food, we still had hunger. Hunger is explained by poverty, not by lack of food. And unfortunately, the fourth lesson is the one that we are essentially concerned about at the moment, which is that wonderful technology, which produced so much food for us, also took a bite out of the environment and the climate and the soils and the water. Next slide. So the context of our current or future food crisis is one in which the thing that saved us is now part of the problem. Industrial agriculture is an approach to agriculture which ignores ecosystems and the services that ecosystems provide and replaces them as much as possible with industrial inputs. So instead of soil fertility, we have chemical fertilizer. Instead of well-balanced ecosystems, we have pesticides. Instead of rainfall, we have irrigation at increasingly large scales, mechanization, of course. And therefore, because of that, especially the fertilizer, we now have a system which produces 20 to 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions that affect us today, that we are concerned about at the moment. Most of that is actually from fertilizer. We put a lot of emphasis on the distribution, the transportation impact of our agricultural system, but it's even more fertilizer than transportation. So we're not going to be able to change the problems of climate disruption without changing our agricultural system. Next slide, please. The other part of the problem that we face is that climate change, climate disruption, fundamentally disrupts our agricultural systems. Climate disruption is a series of changes in the world which increase extremes. So when we have heat waves, and we have heat waves more frequently, we have a new thing in the world, a new climate. So that current previous weather systems and the crops that grew well under those weather systems will be highly stressed by this. Even the simple slight increase in temperature means that plants will be more stressed because evapotranspiration rates go up, the ability of soils to hold moisture goes up. So even without drought, soils are drier and plants are more stressed. And then we add rainfall patterns changing, we add droughts, we add floods, we add changes in when rainfalls happen. Mexican farmers talk to me about the changing canicula, a little dry season that used to be more or less predictable and is now a lot longer and hotter and can happen at times in which they were not used to it happening, things like that. And pests and diseases are increasing frequency. Next slide. So those stresses accumulate, and the ability of plants to produce food is reduced. We expect yields, because of these things, to be less. But not only will yields be less in general, some areas will probably, are predicted to, completely fall out of production because it will simply be too hot or too dry or too wet too often. And the amount of land on which we are able to farm will decrease probably by 8% according to current predictions, but by some of the worst emission scenarios by maybe a third. And we'll have issues with perhaps regional harvest failures, and maybe those regional harvest failures happening at the same time. Next slide. So there's some images, harder to see than I thought they would be when I wrote this, which are from the most recent IPCC report. Basically what they are saying is that if you look at the production of soybeans on your left, and you look at the location of stresses, and then you kind of accumulate those stresses, you see that the areas that are darkest are the areas which will experience the most increased stress in the future. It's kind of concerning how many of those areas are in places in the world which are less able to deal with them than we are here. On the right, you've got wheat. Next slide, please. This is a map of wheat production in the world. And you can see things we often don't think about, but the main producers of wheat in the world are India and China. They're also the main consumers of wheat. We also see a great deal of wheat being produced in Europe, Argentina, and of course the United States and Mexico as well. The concern is that those regions will be have already been subject to periodic crises. A season in the US that starts with floods and ends with heat, and maybe the yields here go down quite a bit. When that happens here, but not in China, things are okay. There can be like balancing out. The prediction is that these kinds of crises will happen simultaneously more frequently in the future. Next slide, please. Right now, there is an event in the world which is not directly related to climate change, but happens in a world in which the climate is changing. Ukraine and Russia together produce about 30% of the world's wheat supply. Right now, that wheat supply is not available to the rest of the world. Of additional concern is that Belarus, also a belligerent in that war, is one of the major producers of fertilizer. Fertilizers which are exported to major producing countries like Pakistan, so on. Ukraine is a number 6 wheat producing country in the world. Pakistan is number 7 or 6 or 7. They switch in some of the lists that I've seen. So what happens now? What happens next year if there's also a harvest failure someplace else? Those stresses in the global food supply will accumulate, and it is of concern. Okay, so back to why in the world did I start talking about 1970 and a food crisis that wasn't? I did that because I wanted to remind us and remind me that the situation that we are facing is one which is, in fact, extremely biophysical. That is to say, it has biological and physical roots and implications. But it's also one which is fundamentally and totally social. So we can think back to some of the observations that we can learn from looking at the 20th century and say that, yeah, population is of concern. Population is going up. Not as fast as we thought, and it doesn't seem to be going like this. It seems to be going like this. But the top of the curve is about 11 billion by 2100, 10 billion by 2050. We're at 7.9 billion right now. Also of concern, perhaps greater concern, is that food consumption per person is also going up. As people in the world get richer, we eat more meat, or people elsewhere in the world start to eat as much meat as us, which is a huge increase in the world. And this means that there are greater and greater demands on the resources of the world. At the same time, yields are decreasing, farm areas coming out of production, etc. So this often is portrayed now or framed as a crisis in which demand is going up and ability of the planet to produce food is going down. There's a lot of truth in that frame, but it's also a frame which terrifies me, because it is a frame which sets us up to think about the world as a series of lifeboats in which we need to protect our own. And if we think about the world that way, we will sail through a world of hurt. Another way of thinking about this is to say, well, wait a minute, maybe we could start thinking first about consumption and waste and some of those kinds of things, and suggest or perhaps wonder if we are producing enough food now to feed 11 billion people, if we distributed it differently, or if we produced it in a more rational and logical manner. Next slide, please. So those areas of thought give us 4 areas in which to think about this future that we face. And one of them is population and consumption. Let's do it at the same time, please. We could do investments in policies which are known to improve human welfare, the rights of women. So we can have woman-centered development policies which have been shown to lead families to be smaller through the rational choices and empowerment of both members of that family, especially the woman. We must perhaps reduce food waste, which currently is 25 or 30% of what we produce. And if we could consume more in line with the local agroecologies, I'm not going to explain that term very well, but I'm just going to bold it 4 times in this slide. If we can consume more in line with what local and regional agroecologies can produce, consumption. Agrofuels, meat, we could reduce those. Technology. So normally when this problem is framed in the way that I framed it a moment ago as rising demand because of population and meat consumption, the answer is GMOs or some kind of additional version of current technologies. The technology that I think that we need is a new relationship with ecology and a type of farming inspired by traditional agriculture, but not the same as traditional agriculture. It's modern, it's ecological, it's scientific, but it goes and does things like look at La Milpa in Mexico and say, oh my, those folks figured some cool things out about relationships of nitrogen-fixing plants and covering the soil and producing multiple crops in the same place at the same time and reducing risk. Learning from those kinds of things, but doing it in a modern scientific way. That would be agroecology. We could empower small farmers. When we look at the world and we see hunger, we often see it in the families of small farmers who are pushed out of their ability to grow food by cheap food policies and cheap imports from the developing world. Agroecology is also an agricultural approach which reduces carbon emissions, actually sequesters them, and so on. Next slide, please, which is my last one, Linda. We can do this. Right now, every year, we spend $600 billion amongst the countries that produce 2/3 of the world food. We spend $600 billion to buy the food system that we have now, which makes us fat, sick, unhealthy, destroys our soils, uses up our water, and fills our atmosphere with greenhouse gas emissions. We could spend that better. We could develop agroecological approaches and spread that and do some major changes in our approach to agricultural development that could make a huge difference. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. If this is your first time to our facility, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please excuse our pixie dust out in the back. We're in the process of adding some more additional recreational amenities for the public. Soon to be coming, we have 8 new permanent pickleball courts, along with I saw some cheers in the back, along with a dedicated outdoor dining area that'll be supporting our senior nutrition program. But today I'm here to talk about our local food systems. Next slide, please. So why local? Local food system can enhance environmental, economic, social, and overall health of the community. Aim is to enhance the sustainability of the community short term. Aim is to have fresher produce. I think one of the things that we see, here in Redlands specifically, is when we were very fortunate, prior to the pandemic, where we had a very sustainable, robust, market night. Provided an opportunity for folks to socialize, to connect, access to nutritional local food, access to our local community gardens. All this was, a sense of commerce, people getting together, within our local area, supporting local businesses. And let's face it, when you purchase in local, fresh produce, it just tastes better too. Next slide. So what distinguishes local from globalized food systems? So 4 things, in my opinion, is 1, food security, self-reliance, sustainability, and as I mentioned before, taste. That's huge. Next slide. So food security. Food access within the community, that's extremely important. Goal is to improve access for all community members to, again, the key word, delicious, nutritious foods. And this is especially true for low-income families. One of the things that concerns me is food deserts that exist, within our community. And what I mean by that is that there are areas and neighborhoods within our communities that might not have as much access to fresh produce as some of our other neighborhoods. And that's really, really something important that we need to look at. Primarily because when you look at the diet that some of our lower income families are consisting of, when they're just eating primarily just sugars and fats and grains, where they don't necessarily have access to fresh produce. So these things are important to provide that. Also, when you look at the rates of obesity, those also increase within those same areas where they have limited access to nutritious foods. Next slide, please. So self-reliance. Why self-reliance? Conserve resources, create local job opportunities, which equals economic opportunities. Really important, keeping money in the community, reinvesting into our own community, and then increasing growing opportunities. More options, which equals more choices. Next slide. Sustainable food system. What is sustainable? It's in a system that delivers food and nutrition security for all in such a way that economic, social, environment bases to generate food security and nutrition for future generations are not compromised. So in short, how do we envision our future for our community? I think one would argue that what makes Redlands so great is that we have a vibrant, engaged community that folks are involved in these wonderful social programs. We have opportunities for social engagement where residents come together and enjoy some of the wonderful amenities that this city has to offer. When we look at access to local nutrition food, these are the things that make this community great, and these are the things that we want to make sure that these are available for our children. so that those are available for them so they can enjoy as well too. Next slide, please. And the most important fact, and this is kind of like my little theme, excuse me, my little thing is taste. Benefit of eating local food. Local food is fresher, it tastes better, and is likely more nutritious. It supports seasonal needs, help discover new foods. I would argue that one of my little pet peeves is that a tomato that you purchase at a grocery store does not taste like a tomato. And I would also argue that that's why so many children do not like produce, is because when you go to a grocery store, they're eating something that doesn't necessarily taste as it should. A tomato is flavorful, it tastes wonderful, it complements so many things, but yet that is not what we're buying when we go to the grocery store. That is the true benefit when we do shop locally, when we support our local farmers. The other piece to this is supporting seasonal needs. Tomatoes don't grow year round, and so as such, there are options where we need to rotate some of the fruits and veggies that we're eating that support the calendar of growth of some of these items. If we buy seasonal fruit and veggies, they're just going to taste better. Next slide, please. Some of the components of a local food system, here in Redlands, is that we have a farmers market and community gardens. Next slide, please. In Redlands, we're very fortunate enough to have 2 certified markets. One is located at the Grove School. The second is located in downtown Redlands. Both are certified markets. Both are unique in nature. The Grove School is unique as it supports the Grove School. There's student involvement in growing some of these fruits and veggies. Our downtown market is unique because of the abundance of local farmers that participate in the farmers market. And then its close proximity, central proximity, to all residents within Redlands. Next slide. So I have a fun little video to go ahead and show you, kind of highlighting, one of the neat features that's available at our farmers market.
Getting more with your CalFresh dollars is easier than ever with Market Match. Visit the Redlands Farmers Market Saturday mornings downtown from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. and come by the red info booth to spend your CalFresh dollars at a market, and we will match up to $10 with Market Match.
So Market Match is a wonderful program. What it does, it allows folks to utilize their EBT and SNAP benefits at the farmers market. Why this is huge is because now they have access to these locally grown fruits and veggies with their EBT benefits. So it gives them choices, gives them options, and what's even better about the Market Match program is that it provides them an additional $10 that they can spend on fruits and veggies. It's a limit up to 10, so if they spend 10, they get another 10 back for a total of 20. If they spend 20, they would just get an additional 10. But again, it provides an option to have additional access to some of these yummy fruits and veggies that are available locally grown here in our area. Next slide, please. So one of the neat things about shopping locally is the taste of some of these delicious foods that are available. And so one of the things that we did is that we put together a video highlighting what you could actually put together, create shopping at the local market, buying local produce.
Hello everybody, so I'm here with Giselle and Matthew with Giselle and Matthew Boutique Cafe, and they're going to tell us a little bit about themselves. Hello guys.
Hi, Sweetie.
So tell us when did you start baking?
We start baking almost a year and a half. We just came back from Europe. So waiting for my visa, I was looking for French pastry this time, and I couldn't find, so I started baking with Giselle, and yeah, we like it.
Nice. So how long have you guys been in business for?
We've been in business as soon as you learn how to paint, so since 2019.
Awesome. So that sounds great. So let's go shopping.
Yep. So today we are going to look for the wildflower honey.
Okay.
This is very good, organic. Why is wildflower sorry, organic? Because we're not looking for something too strong like the one with orange blossom. We are looking more for something to give a texture, like soft texture to the mango.
Got it. So give it a nice soft.
Exactly.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. All right.
So today we are looking for an orange for the juicy orange. So perfect because we are in Southern North for the navel orange. So the good thing is for organic foods because we are going to use the zest as well for the recipe.
So let's head over to Boston next.
Okay. So for the recipe we need 3 eggs.
3 eggs. So how many Madeleines are we gonna make?
Like 32 Madeleines.
That 32 Madeleines, like the entire 32 Madeleines. So the quality of fresh eggs, how does that affect the patient?
So it's make everything. It's make everything. Because my job is just to mix ingredients. So if I would good ingredients, so it's change farmers use fresh eggs, organic, very good.
Got it. And farmers market, best place to get
Yes,
fresh
organic food, fresh, organic foods, everything is very important to come here and
All right. Well, let's get to it, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. All right, Giselle, Matthew, thank you so much for your time and helping us out with this video. I'm really looking forward to the final edit for this video. All right, you guys ready to make?
Yes.
All right, let's go.
Let's go.
We can go and skip to the next slide. So that does give you a quick little overview, an example of, how to, shop locally, how to buy, healthy produce, but still yet eat something yummy as a Madeleine. Next slide, please. Lastly, just wanted to share that we are lucky in our community that we have 3 community gardens for a total of 85 plots. These plots we lease on an annual basis to residents. The plots are leased at a minimal amount, anywhere between $20 to $35 for the year. This includes water, includes access to the plot. So this program is completely subsidized by the city, primarily to support and encourage residents to grow their own fruits and veggies. The majority of our gardeners are seniors. They don't have access to large yards. So for a lot of these folks, they utilize this to supplement their groceries, their items that they utilize. And again, it creates a sense of community, connection, and also socialization for a lot of these folks. Next slide, please. So lastly, some of the actions that you can do to support our local food systems. One, choose a diet rich in locally grown fruits and veggies. Eat seasonal foods. Ask where your vegetables come from. Really, really important. Are your vegetables here grown locally, or are they grown across the continent? Ask that question. Support local farmers. If we don't support those local farmers, they're not going to exist. And they provide a wealth of nutritious and yummy options that are available for us. Shop at our local farmers markets. It supports the farmers. It supports our local businesses. Grow your own garden. There's nothing like growing some fresh peppers and tomatoes in summer, making your own salsa. There's nothing like it in the world. Or join a CSA, which is a community support agriculture. Three Sisters Farm. It's a small organic farm in the San Mateo Canyon. It's an option that is available over here. I like to end in closing that, again, I'm real passionate about delicious food and access to that. And so I brought over some of, in my opinion, some of the best strawberries I've ever had in my life. These are locally grown from Yaceno Farms. They're in the back, so after this presentation, please go back, have a strawberry. It's like eating candy. And so, again, it is an example of what, fresh fruit actually tastes like. It's addicting, it's contagious. Enjoy it. Thank you, everyone.
Aha, this way I can move my head and gesture wildly on the screen. Alrighty, so this is the final presentation of the final talk of this 5-talk speaker series. So I hope everyone has learned a little something, is fired up about building more resilient neighborhoods, and we're going to talk about one of the most important aspects of neighborhoods of all. That is food, because like water, we all need food to survive. We have all in this room hopefully eaten at least one meal today, preferably more. It's healthier that way, but there's food in the back right now that you can eat. Some of you may be going home and eating dinner after this. When we wake up tomorrow, we will be eating breakfast. The point is, we cannot distance ourselves from food. We also don't want to distance ourselves from food. As the last presentation has shown, food is very, very good. It's delicious. It's also an integral part of our culture. Just think about all of the holidays of your own family and how many of those are tied to the consumption of food in some way. However, just because food is completely tied to our daily lives and necessarily tied to our daily lives doesn't mean that we can't take steps to remove ourselves from the industrial food system and from the globalized food system. If we want to build resilient neighborhoods, we need to stop relying on food that is grown hundreds of thousands of miles away and start bringing it back to the community. And we're very lucky here in California that, especially in Southern California, we're in a Mediterranean climate, which means hot summers, mild winters. It extends the growing season. Last I read, California produces about 50% of the agriculture in the United States, not just in California. So we're already very lucky and we're already in a very unique position to really decentralize ourselves. It's really about moving forward and expanding that. So the first thing we are going to do is local gardens. Local gardens can save on food bills. They are ways to relax, exercise, and be outdoors. If you would like some really interesting reading, look up gardening therapy and especially how that's been used to help inmates in the past. Very interesting, very unique. You can grow traditional foods not found in supermarkets and can grow a wider variety of foods that are better suited to our environments. When I say variety, I don't mean the number of Oreo flavors that you can find in the grocery store. There are a ton of them. I don't know what they're doing. But a variety of foods is especially important. These days, our food system has been so streamlined that you likely only eat 2 or 3 different types of protein: chicken, pork, and beef. You likely only eat 2 or 3 different types of grains: potatoes, rice, and wheat. And you likely only eat a handful of vegetables: apples, bananas, oranges, tomatoes, lettuce, if you're me, an unhealthy amount of bell peppers. However, we are humans, we are omnivores, we can eat such a wide variety of foods. I was a bit of a wild child in San Francisco. I went a bit weird. I got a permit from the city to collect bird eggs, wild bird eggs. I would get up every morning during crabbing season, walk down to the pier, plop in my crab trap, come back at dusk, pick it up. That was my protein for the week. I started using acorn flour in my baking because acorns are from that area and apparently a lot of people use it. That's the kind of variety we want in our food system. We need to stop thinking in such narrow terms of what food is and start getting a little crazy and a little wild. It's fine. Try a squirrel one day. It's not going to kill you. People have eaten them for thousands of years. I'm sure they're tasty, if not a little gamey. Local gardens can also help beautify cities. They help reduce air pollution, strengthen community ties, and reduce heat. We did talk a little bit in our heat presentation about how just the presence of having green space in a community helps bring down the temperature. And so we again see these solutions to one problem actually being solutions to multiple problems. And that's what's really important when we're building resilient communities. We want those multi-solutions to solve multiple problems. Slide. Neighborhoods with successful gardens can combat food insecurity. They build on resources to help deal with urban problems. They can fight climate change by reducing the distance food travels and minimizes the carbon footprint. They boost the local economy, improve community health, particularly by increasing the amounts of fresh fruits and vegetables available in the diet. And they can create social capital. Studies have shown that communities with community gardens tend to have less of those socioeconomic problems than communities without. You especially see this in cities like Detroit, which have had a very large push for community gardens and have really worked to build up their social capital through the use of community gardens. So how can you build a garden? We have heard in the past slide, or at the past presentation, about some of the community gardens around Redlands. However, maybe you don't want to go that route, or maybe you don't have the money to go that route. Perfectly fine. There are other ways you can do this. First one, I really like this book. It's called Square Foot Garden by Mel Bartholomew. Exactly what it says on the tin. How can you make a garden in 1 square foot of space? That's not very big. Most people have it. Not everyone, but most. And so if you're thinking, well, if I want to support myself and support all of my food needs, I need acres and acres of land and hours of my day just weeding and trimming and fertilizing. No, we have weakened our food system to the point where it takes a lot more labor than it should. You can throw some seeds in a square foot garden, have them fight for dominance. Whatever comes out, that's what you eat. No, go back. Go back. One side. There we go. Another thing you can do, people can take on a couple vegetables. You can have sort of like this decentralized community garden where maybe you take on tomatoes and squash and arugula, and then your neighbor over here can take on apples because they got an apple tree in their yard. And then when all of that is harvested, you come together, and instead of you trying to figure out what to do with 50 pounds of tomatoes, you can force them on your neighbors. And it's okay, because when their zucchini harvest comes in, they can force their zucchinis on you. It was part of the pact. And finally, somebody might be feeling super generous. They can donate their front yard. You don't have to do that, but it's always nice if you want to get together with the neighbors and say, hey, my yard is available for you to use to grow plants. But, not everyone has the time to grow all of their foods, which is why we're going to talk about CSAs and farmers markets. CSAs stand for Community Supported Agriculture. It's either pick up or drop off. I can't remember what the one here is. I think it's pick up, but essentially the farm grows food, it puts it in a box, you get the box, you don't complain. You get what you get and you don't complain. Farmers markets, you get a little bit more choice. You can show up and it's kind of like grocery shopping, and also farmers markets have become not just a place for produce, but also for things like honey, baked goods, cheeses. I've seen cheeses at a couple of farmers markets, and I love cheese, so I'm very happy about that. It's all local farmers, locally produced. You get to know the people in your community who are growing the food, and you know that it is grown nearby. It's in season, which brings awareness back to the earth and the weather. And your money stays in the community and improves strong community connections. In the very first talk that we did, a huge part of it was focused on boosting the local economy. We cannot have resilient communities if our local economy is not strong. Next slide. So CSA and farmers markets, contact your local government to see if there's a farmers market in your area. We do know of 2 in Redlands, but I think based on the map over there, there might be a few people who are outside of Redlands, so get in contact. But also keep in mind, just because a market is in your city doesn't mean it is a community market, which is a good point to bring up to any city council members or members of farmers markets. We did talk a little bit about food deserts. Food deserts are defined as anywhere, I think it's within 1 mile walking distance. A lot of people live in a food desert, and farmers markets are sadly not something that is accessible to everyone. We are very, very lucky in Redlands that our farmers markets are on the weekends, which means most people who work can go to them. That is not the case everywhere. I know some cities, they're like at Thursday at 2 p.m.? Who is available to go grocery shopping at Thursday at 2 p.m.? I work for a living. I can't go. And even if I did, where would I put my groceries? I have to go back to work. It's also important to note that farmers markets are sometimes seen as very gentrified, and so certain marginalized communities may not feel comfortable going to a farmer's market. That is why it is so important to talk to the organizers and the city council members. They are doing their best, but they are not omnipotent, they are not omnipresent. If you have an issue, talking with them can help create solutions and give you ideas on how to deal with that solution. That is why community matters. It is so important for everyone to come together and talk about what issues they are having. If they don't know, they cannot fix it. They cannot even attempt to fix it. Research local farmers markets and CSAs in your area and make a point to shop at them. And create a community action plan to visit farmers markets. Farmers are small businesses, essentially. They cannot have the same hours as a Costco or a Stater Bros, which means no matter how good we are at distributing our farmers markets, there will always be some issue with accessibility. And we are not going to chain the farmers to the tables and force them to be there Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., so that everyone in the community can go to the farmers markets. That's why create a plan with other members in your community. Can somebody drive you to a farmer's market if you don't have a car? Or can you make a point to get a grocery list from everyone? Go there, get all their food, distribute it, kind of like a renegade Uber Eats. So we've talked about growing your own food, very important. For the food you can't grow, we've talked about going to the farmer's market. But you are human. Eventually, you will produce waste. Whether it is banana peel, eggshells, chicken bones, whatever it is, you will eventually produce waste. And you need to get rid of it somehow. And we do not want that waste ending up in a landfill because, believe it or not, it doesn't really rot away. There's too much stuff on top of it, so even compostable materials don't usually compost in a landfill because they don't have the aerobic respiration required to really grow those little microbes. Compost, though, is so important. Soil is so important. It is strange how often soil gets looked over in terms of climate change because soil is honestly one of the main predictors of ecosystem health. Furthermore, they are an ecosystem. It is a group of trillions of bacteria and living organisms that come to create this living, thriving thing. And it is so important if we are to be resilient towards things like drought, extreme heat, and flooding, all things that we have heard multiple times throughout this talk. Composting also helps prevent erosion during extreme storms. It allows more water to absorb during heavy rainfalls and foster plant growth. If we want to talk about how to build resilient communities, resilient food systems, we have to discuss compost. And we discussed it a little bit last week, but we're going to go into more detail this week. Isn't it fun? San Francisco, yes, I've wrecked it a lot this talk, but you're going to have to deal with it. San Francisco has reduced the amount of trash it sends to landfills by 80% and composts 255,000 tons of organic matter each year. When you get to San Francisco, you have these three bins. The black one is trash, the green one is compost, blue one is recycling, and most of it goes into compost or recycling. Next slide. Community compost, define the path and goal. Check with your local government. No one needs to get fined because they set up an illegal composting bin, please. I know we're a little punk rock here, but we don't need to be that punk rock. Get containers for participants to determine if it's pickup or drop-off. Choose people to deal with it. We don't want you to just put a giant pile of compost in your backyard and then leave it at that. That helps no one. Choose a composting method. Up in this picture, we actually have a method known as hot composting. It takes more effort, but the end result is beautiful, award-winning even. Find an end use for your materials. Food scraps and yard trimmings can easily turn into beneficial compost, especially for apartment dwellers. And get local school children involved. They love to get dirty. And I believe this is my last slide. You can also do it yourself. Again, like we were saying with this sort of renegade, decentralized food system, we can also have this renegade decentralized composting system if you don't want to drive to the Redlands Community Center and drop off your own scraps because it's far away and you're a little lazy like I am. Worm bins are especially nice. I know several people who have worm bins. If you do it right, they don't smell. They're literally in their house. They're kind of big and bulky down there, that's worm bins, so keep that in mind. Look it up on YouTube. Very easy to create. Easy fertilizer for your garden and saves money on trash bags. Just keep in mind with the worm bin, they are living creatures. They can't necessarily eat everything that you would like them to eat. So keep that in mind if you make your worm bin. And I believe that's time. That's fine. I think this was my last slide. So I hope these ideas were helpful to you. And just remember, even if you can't invoke them all, you can still pick and choose and make them work for you. That's what's most important here, is to fire you up, get you thinking, so that you can create a community action plan that is tailored to you and your neighborhood. With that, we are done.
That was great. So could we have our speakers come up to the table? And we'll have some time for Q&A. So, who's got, is that on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, who's got a question for one of our speakers here? Tommy?
Yeah, you talked about, I think last week, about a compost bin being over by, on Kansas, where you drop papers and recycle things. I looked, I did not see any. Can you give me an idea, anybody, where it's located?
We can hear you without it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't have, I guess they didn't bring the second mic, so
Oh,
can
that's
you talk
fine.
really loud?
Not that way.
Oh, mine's, okay, great.
So we currently have one of the food compost bins located at this facility, right here in the parking lot. So that's one location that's available. There's other locations closer over to the city yard, which is where animal control is located, closer to where the new post office is. The names of the streets are escaping me at the moment,
Park.
Thank you, yes. If you like, after this presentation, I can give you the exact addresses of all those places.
Another question?
Yeah, I have a question about market night. It used to be, and in some of the magazines, they bragged about Redlands having a market night on Thursday evenings on State Street. There were a lot more vendors there, and people at work could go there. And when I go to the one here, Redlands, it's so small. But this was big, and it's too bad it doesn't come back, because it drew a lot of people. A lot of people.
So it's probably like the number one question that we get over the past year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the market did have to close during the pandemic. And where city staff is currently evaluating options as far as being able to bring the market back, because we recognize that it is a valuable program. It's a program that's been tradition in the community. It brought people together. The community would like it back. So we're just evaluating the best way of how to bring that program back in a safe and competent manner that would not only be conducive for the residents, but also be supportive of our local businesses.
Another question? Go ahead.
Why has nothing been said about the vegan lifestyle and the impact that would have on our food supplies?
Who would like to take that question?
I have something to say about that. I asked that question of, I forgot his name. He wrote 350.
Bill McKibben?
Yeah, he was at U of R. And I asked him, and he said they didn't spend that much effort on it because only 5% of the people will respond to that. So they don't waste their time on that, they try different options.
Oh, interesting, thank you.
But they're
become vegan.
But there are projections being made that the world will have to go vegan.
That's
if we're
right,
going to
there is.
save the
Yes,
planet.
exactly.
So why aren't we talking about it here?
So one of the reasons why I personally didn't talk about it is, one, I feel like a lot of people, that's a very personal choice, that's not really a community choice. But secondly, just because you're vegan does not remove you from the industrial food system we have created. You can still eat Swedish fish, you can still eat bell peppers grown in Argentina. And so it is important, and we will have to cut our meat dramatically. However, it is more important for us to remove ourselves from that globalized industrial food system and focus more on community agriculture. And if community agriculture allows you to eat chicken eggs or the occasional side of pig once in a while, then that's fine. It's again less about completely removing meat, which you're right, we will have to dramatically decrease it, and more about simply making sure our food comes from local sources that are grown using organic, non-synthetic fertilizers and what have you.
Linda.
I have a question for Daniel. We recently watched a movie titled Kiss the Ground on Netflix that was about regenerating the earth through farming methods. And one of those was not to have mass turning over of the soil, which depletes the soil and sends it up into the atmosphere. Is that kind of farming doable on a small scale?
Yes. I mean, I think that the goal is to develop agricultural systems which are based on mutually supportive ecological relationships between plants and some animals, and that produce a variety of foods and environmental services instead of the industrial monocrop approach that we do now. This is something that is being done. One of the other reasons that we should support local agriculture is because those are the people who are keeping the knowledge base going that we will need to build on for a sustainable food producing future. But that particular technique that you learned about in that documentary is one of many, many, many that can be used in agroecological production systems.
Elsa.
And what about, the emission of methane gas that's, has been shown that is caused mainly by the farming of the cows? So instead of, the methane gas has been shown also that it is 4 times more harmful than the CO2. So it's not a personal choice anymore to, decrease our consumption of meat. That's why, so instead of decreasing the carbon footprint, we should decrease also the emission of methane gas.
I just want to say something just with regards to that. What I find really interesting just over the past few years, there's a product called Beyond Beef, which is really accessible at almost every supermarket now. What's interesting about this product is that when, at least from an article that I read, is that when they created this, when they developed this, they didn't develop it for vegetarians or for vegans. They created it to market it specifically to meat eaters. So when they designed this, they designed it with the idea that how are they going to appeal this product to someone who already eats meat? And so, although there is still a taste difference, one would argue that they've come a long way in the past 20 years, from a garden burger to now a Beyond Beef patty. So it's at least from my perception, it looks like there's more alternatives and options that are available.
Thank you. One hand over here. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, yeah. It would be worth asking one of the individuals who are running the show here tonight to have someone show you where the container is for the food particles, because really nice thing. It's not a 3-yard bin with a bunch of junk in it. It's a container that you have to put it in a bag, put it inside. It doesn't look like it would be in a compost container. So take a look at it, because that's what they look like all over town.
Yeah, thank you. One more, real quick.
Yeah, so this question has kind of been like lingering in my head from Daniel's presentation with the information on like the, what I assume was the federal budget, like 600, it was like 600 billion. Are you, was it not, or?
Finish your question, I'll clarify.
Oh, well, my question on like the political advocacy side of things, of like, cause I as a regular person I don't have a lot of access to the political power to make those decisions on how the federal or state budget is like spent, especially on like, and I don't have a lot of access to power of like how to provide new economic systems, because like this big statistic on my mind is that like 70% of emissions are made by like 100 corporations or something, right? Like everyone probably hears that, and it's like, what do you do? I don't know. It's a big question.
Yeah, and we just have a couple minutes to answer.
Well, that is maybe the question. The question. Right? It's a question of how do we leverage change. So the figure that I shared with you actually comes from a World Bank study, and it is an estimate of agricultural subsidies amongst the countries that produce 2/3 of agriculture, which basically is the United States and Europe and Japan. And those countries subsidize agricultural systems, including confined animal feeding operations that produce the methane that was mentioned earlier, and give us unhealthy meat with a huge environmental impact that is not very expensive. Not truly cheap meat that doesn't cost a lot of money, but costs a lot of other things. So your question is, can we solve that by being personally vegan? That would be great if everyone was personally vegan. Can we solve that by being individually making choices to eat lower on the food chain? We can't solve it that way, but we should be doing that because it's a step on the path to solving it. But then we can start to think about how do we influence, how do we get people like you to start not thinking, oh, I have no power, but thinking, I'm going to use my power. And one of the ways that we can do that is by realizing where we are at and where we need to go, and by recognizing things like we got to where we are now through a series of policy choices that were made historically and that could be made differently in the future. Farm Bill is one of the biggest things in the US budget, second only to the military. The Farm Bill is determined by people that we vote for. We can make what we need to happen clearer to them than we do now, and it would be a struggle, it'll be a fight. But at some point, people are going to realize that we can't keep going on the way that we're going on now. And then we need to have some ideas of where to go. And meetings like this are part of that process.
Thank you, Daniel. All right.
I'm sorry, one of the people over here, we're trying desperately to get your attention.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, here's one.
Okay,
I know
I'm
I
so
have
sorry.
one in front
Go
of you.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was wondering, could you speak to the drought that we face? And, I'm just thinking about how do we support our local farmers, community gardens, our own personal gardens, if we aren't gonna, I'm just assuming I'm not gonna have as much water to be able to feed myself, or,
Also don't want to touch it. Rain barrels. You get yourself a rain barrel. That will help with your personal garden.
Also, just in general, some policy changes on the city, state, and national level to decrease the amount of water going towards ornamental landscaping and focusing on a switch from ornamental non-native plants to native or low water drought tolerant plants will go a long way. I don't think you were here for the water talk, but we did talk about that as being one of the biggest uses of water is actually just landscaping. So if we want to create more sustainable, more resilient farmlands, we are going to need to put aesthetics second over function, and a huge part of that will be rethinking how we create beauty on our land and in our own personal little plots of city. And that's going to go a long way into making sure those water rights are properly, and that's why science that'll go a long way to making sure that the water rights are properly separated out in between farmlands, which we need, and also some less necessary beautifying efforts that can also be very healthy for a community, but aren't necessary for the survival of the community.
Thank you, Tyra.
And they can also use soaker hoses and drip systems in our
Right.
gardens.
Is there one last burning question that we must take? Okay, go ahead.
My question is about GMOs, about genetically modified plants. What is your take on that? Is that healthy? Is that a good answer? Because I saw in a documentary that Bill Gates is buying up tons of farmland and supposedly working on this project of
So most GMOs are developed by the same companies that have developed the other agricultural technologies that are not moving us anywhere quickly. Most GMOs are not nearly as productive as they were promised to be, and most GMOs are totally tied into agricultural production systems, which are extremely chemical intensive. So the way that GMOs are being applied now are not really part of the future that is sustainable. In some kind of an abstract level, perhaps the technology itself could have a role if it was developed and deployed in a democratic as opposed to a corporate manner. But that's a very kind of abstract and theoretical idea.
Okay, folks, I think we're going to have to end it there. I'm so delighted that there is so much interest in this topic, though. Let me just ask me, one or two people, what's your main takeaway from this session tonight, in a sentence or two? Anybody? What's your main takeaway? What are you going to be chewing on for a while later tonight? Anybody?
Buy locally.
Buy locally. Yeah, okay, one more? One more? Somebody who hasn't spoken, maybe? Is there anybody who hasn't spoken? Okay.
I'm thinking also to try to influence in my little circle, when I go out to a restaurant, ask where does their food come from? Is it local? And tell them that that's important to me. And if it is, tell them I'll be back.
Great ideas. And that moves us right into my next question. As we always do, we want you guys to put up the practical actions that make sense to you in terms of securing our local food supply. So we have our sticky wall up there, and you can put them up later, but let's just hear a couple right now. What's one thing you heard tonight that you would really like to do in the next couple weeks, start to implement? Anybody? Anybody have one? Yeah? Go ahead.
I eat a vegetable that I don't really know the name of in the grocery store. I go past the unfamiliar vegetables, and I never tried it.
Oh, keep trying a new vegetable. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. And maybe one more, May?
I would like to get a composter, like you said, you have one on your kitchen sink. I would like to get one of those.
Great. All right, so hopefully you'll have a lot more ideas that you can put up on our sticky wall at our closing. And we've had such an enormous amount of ideas which you've gotten in your letter each week, so I hope you're paying attention to those. So maybe the last question I have for you tonight is, what would you say is the significance of this series for you? What has the significance of it been for you in your life? Anybody?
I think part of it is just making us more aware of everything
light switches off, plastics, everything. It just making us more aware
Right.
of things on
Wonderful, thank you. Anybody else? Mhm.
We must be so much more passionate about saving our planet.
Yes, yes, thank you. Anybody else? One more back, Ajit.
Say that we can say that the prices are now, before we were thinking 50 years down the line, this will happen, or 60 years. So we understand from this series that it's happening right now,
Yeah.
today. So we have to work on something today.
Yeah, thank you, Baljeet. And maybe that's a good note to end on. I want to, let me just see if I get this back in here. Yeah, there it goes. Well, I'll just hold it. Anyway, we want to say thank you again to our presenters, Daniel Klooster, Dave Jaffe, and Tyra Delger. Give them a big hand. Bill.
Do you have any information yet on the April event?
On the what?
The April event?
The climate action.
The April event. It is on Eventbrite. You can sign up now. Yeah. Yes, we do. It's going to be at the University of Redlands in Gregory Hall, room 177. Yeah, thank you for asking.
It's important to mention now what is next.
Right, that's coming up.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So, again, I really want to thank the city for the use of this room, and the community center staff have been so wonderful in setting this up each week. And I really want to thank all of our volunteers who have helped for these events. I want them all to stand up. All of the volunteers who have helped, please stand up, and I want everybody to give you a big hand. Come on, guys, in the back. All of those people on the back tables there. Yeah, where's Catherine? I don't even see her here. Oh, there you are, Catherine. All right, standing up, good. Thank you. Special thanks for all that you've done. So just a few announcements. Someone asked me, or told me, don't let the momentum die. Well, I want to tell you we're not going to. And, oh, you've got it up there, great. So we've got some ideas up here that I just kind of like to get a show of hands to see how much interest there would be in some of these things, so we kind of know what maybe to work on first. But the first thing is a given. We are doing, would you believe it, 6 presentations at the Redlands City Council. They have asked us to kind of summarize each one of these talks for the City Council. So that starts next week with me and various people will be presenting who are in this room. So it would be great if some of you would attend. Let the City Council know that you're passionate about this issue and that we need to really start focusing on it. And then I'm calling it the Oakland Dig Out. I had the pleasure of going up to Los Rios Nature Trail with I'll say a word about these folks over here in a minute, but we were looking at seedlings that are available up there of native plants and trees that could be brought down here and people could have them for free who are working in our Anca neighborhoods. So that would be an event where you could go and help dig up plants and plant them. How many think that sounds like fun to do? Okay, great, all right. And then we have the Climate Cafe. We've already asked Olive Market if we could use their space, just because it's such a community node. And that would be, I got this idea from someone here who keeps saying on their little sheets, I wish there was more interaction. And we do too. So this is a chance for interaction. It's a no agenda evening where you just come and you talk to others who are concerned about climate change and how it is affecting us. And so it would be like an hour and a half at Olive Market in the evening after they're closed. So how many would be interested in coming to something like that? Okay, quite a few of you, all right. And then the Anca Demonstration Forum, we already talked about that, April 30th at the university. I hope that many of you will come. Even if you're not sure you want to do a forum in your neighborhood yet, come and experience it. Just take a look at it, and you might change your mind. And you can sign up now on Eventbrite, okay? And then the last one is what I talked about last week, and that's trying to reach more people in our neighborhoods with basic climate education. There are great documentaries out there. And so we thought we could do a movie evening, and then we could follow it with a discussion, the kind of that we would recommend you do in your living room. How many would be interested in coming to a movie and having a discussion after? Okay, all right. So it looks like there's about equal interest in all of them, so yes.
On the city council, do you know what the topic is, April 5th? Because some of us might want to make comments.
Yes, I guess, can you do, Denise, can they do that after somebody, like, okay, yeah.
Or we can do it before, actually.
Okay.
Wonder
Oh.
April 5th,
Yeah,
what it is?
I'm going to speak then. They wanted it to be about Anca and a summary of the first session in 5 minutes. Yeah, the comments would be nice. All right. So, all right. So then, just in closing, ideas on the wall. This is your last chance to check out the resource table. Diane and Sharon Swan did such a great job on the resource table, didn't they? So many great things there. Yeah. I hope you've looked at it and made note of some of those things. They're all available to you. And then I want you to check out this other table if you haven't already. This group of people here is very special to me. These are the California Climate Action Corps students, Brian and Jennifer, and Calhoun, I know you, Calhoun, way back there, yeah. So these guys work at the university farm, which is called SURF, right? And this is the most amazing place. There is a picture up here on their brochure. I want you to be sure and take a look at it. And even better than that, go visit it. Right on. Oh my Lord. And go and visit it. It just blew my mind. And it's like this amazing resource for our community that I don't think hardly anybody knows about. So, and they've got some brochures there. And then the other thing that they do is it's a program called Tree Stock. And they make free trees available in the community. So they've how many trees have you put out there already?
About between 2,000 and 4,000 tree saplings.
Wow. Isn't that incredible? Yeah. So their mission is to increase the tree canopy here in Redlands. So it's very exciting what they're doing. So stop and talk to them and get to know them. All right. And let me see. Yes, I just wanted to say that I want to thank all of those of you who have volunteered to stay with Anca and work with us in the future. It's very exciting how many of you have done that, and I look very much forward to talking with you, getting to know you in the future. I went to the doctor today, and my doctor told me she was retiring, and she said, you know what, I'll volunteer with you though. So people are really, I think, ready to do something about climate change. And then, what is the last thing here? Glasses. Yes, just to thank you all for being here and coming so faithfully for so many evenings in a row. It was a lot, I know, but I'm very happy with the way it turned out and very happy to get to know many of you here, and I hope we'll see you again at many other, not just Anca events, but other climate-related events in the community or at the Redlands Conservancy. They have so many wonderful programs at the university farm. There's so many things in the community, so check it out. Keep your ears open, find out what's out there. So thank you all. Let's enjoy our closing time.